Victoria Clark, member of Sedona Heritage Museum, and I'm pleased to be here with you today talking about one of my many collections, and that's my comic or humor postcard collection. How did I get into postcards? It's not really one of the most popular hobbies today, but in 1997 I found myself moved from Tucson to Glendale, Arizona, where we lived for 2.5 years for my husband's job. And of course I love garage sales, so one day out in Sun City I spotted a garage sale that had a lot of boxes on a table. And when I went, there was all these good Arizona postcards. And so I went through, and being a little homesick for Tucson, I pulled out a lot of Tucson postcards, and I thought this would be fun to have, and maybe someday I would write about different places in Tucson. But that was it. And as I was standing there buying the postcards, which were a nickel, by the way, I started talking to this very nice gentleman, and he invited me to a meeting of the Arizona Postcard Club that met in Central Phoenix. So he called later. I'd given him my phone number and invited my husband Mike and I to a meeting, and I thought, okay, I'm busy with my job and he's busy with his, and we have no more time for any clubs, but we'll just go once and I'll ask some questions and that would be it. Well, 3 years later, I found myself the president of the Arizona Postcard Club, and my husband Mike, who collects gas and oil items, he started collecting postcards of service stations, and I started collecting all things Arizona. I might want to tell you I also love holiday cards, so I have a collection of New Year's cards, Christmas cards, Valentine cards, but my favorite is still my Arizona collection, which has grown to over 4,000 cards. What am I going to do with all those cards? Well, I've used them in my writing. I've used them for talks. I have my Sedona collection willed to our museum here, and then I have all the Arizona others willed to the State Historical Society, which I hope they can use at least the more rare ones for their image bank. So that's kind of how I got into postcards, and I admit I'm a postcard addict. So today we're going to talk about 3 amazing Arizona artists who drew some wonderful comic tourist cards. I will tell you their names in a little bit, but what's a tourist card? Well, it's some of the old humorous cards that were done mostly from 1940 to 1960. And today, some of them are considered a little bit naughty or a little bit racist or a little bit sexist, but they sure were funny. And tourists gravitated to those, and they went out all over the world. The theme of the comic postcards in Arizona was pretty much what you would expect. Tourists who sat on cacti, tourists whose cars broke down, tourists in outhouses, tourists making fun of the desert critter. One of my favorites shows a lady tourist saying to her husband in all seriousness, while she is looking at a Arizona rattler, "Why, he's a friendly little snake. He's just waving his tail at me," and other really ridiculous things that would make people laugh. These cards went all over the world. So anyway, how did that tourist boom start in Arizona? Before World War II, you may know, Arizona had the 5 C's. All Arizona school kids were required to learn them and very often do posters or other projects involving them. Citrus, cactus, copper, cotton, and climate. But as we all know, most of the cotton fields that started in Phoenix and went down to Yuma, Tucson, and almost to the border are gone, except for a few. Our citrus, sadly, we've built more homes over citrus groves in Tucson and Phoenix than I care to mention. Of course, copper is still valuable to our state, and new copper mines are coming along, but in truth, climate is the one that keeps Arizona running and has for many years since World War II. Prior to World War II, travel was very expensive, almost elitist, and roads were non-existent in Arizona or not very good. After World War II, most trains were converted to accommodate passengers all over our country. And so trains were running. I know Sunset Limited arrived in Tucson and usually brought a lot of my family to Tucson. And cars, automobiles, gas was cheap. Cars were being made after World War II again, and people just couldn't get enough of travel. So it was the tourist that really fueled the comic postcard and the regular postcard industry. The three artists we're going to be talking about today are very different and yet had similarities too. The first will be Hal Empty, the second is Red Manning, and the third is Bob Petley. Hal Empty, he's an interesting character. He was from Duncan, Arizona, where he grew up. I don't know if many of you have been to the southeast corner of Arizona, but Duncan is just below Morenci and very close to Safford, almost to the Arizona border. I think many of you know two other famous people from Duncan, although even today it's just mainly a service station, a couple of convenience stores, and a few houses and a couple fields. How many of you have read anything about the life of Sandra Day O'Connor? Her ranch and her family were in Duncan for many, many years. The other one that I know of would be the famous Western artist Tim Cox. He grew up right between Morenci and Safford, but their family life centered around Duncan because that was by far the biggest place to shop and hang out. So back to Hal Empty. He was a young boy, an ambitious young boy, who worked in the local drugstore. There was only one for miles around. And when he graduated high school, the older druggist was just set to retire. And with that said, the town put together enough money to send Hal Empty to the University of Arizona in Tucson. That's where he was educated as a pharmacist. And to this day, he holds the distinction of being Arizona's youngest pharmacist because he graduated from the U of A at the ripe old age of 19. So he went back to Duncan and helped the druggist, and when the druggist sold the drugstore to he and his wife, then he had an idea. Besides being a druggist, he loved to draw. And he loved to paint. So he put paintings on the wall of the drugstore, and he changed the name to the Wall Art Drug. Pretty appropriate. Then he noticed people that were coming through on the highway were continually asking for postcards. And he didn't sell any back then. He didn't have any of the area or even any of Arizona at that time. So, liking to draw the way he did, and he loved horses and mules being from that area, he started drawing postcards simply for tourists with funny sayings. Most of them had swayback mules or kissing horses or tourists being thrown off. They were done in black and white, pen and ink, and he sold them for a nickel. They were cute, they were popular, and because the people who were bringing supplies to the drug store bought supplies all over and took them all over, he started selling his postcards to other stores, and he really enjoyed those comic postcards as well as fine art. Now, Hal continued, he and his wife, to live in Duncan until they retired. And at the end of the stay in Duncan, he decided to open an artist, which was fine art, gallery down in Tubac, Arizona. Many of you, if you have not visited Tubac, it is a wonderful, wonderful artist town. While Hal Empty passed away, his daughter, named Anne, continues to run his gallery there. And she carries all the reproductions of his first comic cards. I hope you will visit there and learn a little bit more about Hal and his life and enjoy his fine art as well as the comic cards. The second artist that we want to talk about is different, and his art is very different. And I am betting if you have lived in Arizona very long, you will have seen one or two of his books because they're still in print today, even though he was born in 1912 and did a lot of his art in the 1930s and 40s. And that would be Reg Manning. Reg Manning was actually born in Kansas, but his family came to their health to Phoenix, Arizona, when he was ready to enter high school. And by the way, he went to Phoenix Union High School, which is still around in a different form. It's always been unusual structures for Arizona. They're more Grecian columns, things like that. And they're downtown Phoenix. So if you pass by them on your way to the Diamondbacks or the Suns or the Art Museum down there, and you look over, Phoenix Union High School was converted for use by ASU, and they're still being used. But anyway, to return to Reg, when he was a student at Phoenix Union, he had a best friend, and I think many of you might know him. It was Barry Goldwater. Barry loved to take photos while Reg loved to draw, and people who knew him said they always saw him drawing on anything, even if it was a piece of cardboard. Drawing was definitely his thing. Reg met his wife there at Phoenix Union, and after they married, he remained in Phoenix, and he started to work for the Arizona Republican and the Phoenix Gazette. Now, the Arizona Republican, today, as you know it, is the Arizona Republic. And he took a job heading up their cartoons. Their cartoon section was called The Big Parade, so he did daily cartoons as well as a cartoon section on Sunday. And his most famous cartoon that he did for them was called Lil Dudette. And for the time, she was a little bit shocking and a little bit naughty in what she said. She was scantily clad in very, very short shorts, cowboy boots, and she always was posed like a 1940s girl should be or would be for a pinup. And after he finished kind of the cartoon stage, his life and his outlook got a little more serious. So he started drawing political cartoons just like what we have today. His political cartoons were so good and to the point, you know, we look at them and there's a bit of funniness in them, but we also look at them as a serious meaning or a truth behind them. And Reg got so good at his political cartoons that he decided that's all he was going to do. So during the Korean conflict, he was sent to the war zone or the conflict zone in Korea as a journalist and photographer, but he continued to draw. So his most famous cartoon is called The Hats. You can look at that. I don't have a copy of it, but if you would like to see it, it is online. And the cartoon featured the first panel of silk top hats, and the second panel, sadly, had the soldier's helmet draped on a field cross on his grave. And of course, the point being, the silk hats make the decision, but it's the young soldiers that die. And we haven't changed too much if we look at our politics about war today. So anyway, that aside, winning the Pulitzer was just a really wonderful thing for him. By the way, he published many books when he got back from Korea on Arizona's cactus. They're quite funny. They do have a lot of truth in them, and they're still around today. His most famous book and bestseller is called What Kind of Cactus Is It? And I think that anybody who really loves Arizona or who would like to show off cactus in Arizona would enjoy buying a copy of that book. Reg continued his work until he passed away. And I would like to tell you that if you're really interested in Reg Manning, his comic cards, his comic strips, or his books, he donated all his papers and originals to Arizona State University. And if you would like to see them, contact their Special Collections Division. Now, the third artist is very special too. And his name was Bob Teeple Peterson. He was born in Akron, Ohio, and he wanted to be a boxer. So he started out as an amateur boxer, and that's what he wanted to be, but unfortunately, two things happened. He developed a bad form of arthritis, and his body just wouldn't allow him to be that, and his doctor insisted that he come to a warmer climate. So he did. He moved to Arizona, and he got a job with the Arizona Republic at that time as a display advertising person and salesman. He would go out and he did a lot of the drawing for it, but he also had a very good eye for art, and he had a very good head for business, which a lot of artists, sadly, maybe have a wonderful eye for art, but aren't the best business people. But Bob didn't fall into that. He really kept his eye out for something that he could really make a decent amount of money at. So he developed his line of cards, and he just had one of the best senses of humor. You'll see some of his cards that, like Hal Empty's, originally were drawn in black and white, but then later editions were colorized. So his is kind of unique in that fact. He too loved the humor of the cacti, the cowboy, the tourist, the heat, and so on. And he was quite correct that tourism would be Arizona's next big business. So he continued to work for the Arizona Republic selling ads until he realized, hey, I am selling more cards and spending more time on that, and I see the potential if I just work it. So he did something unique. He made his own displays. What do I mean? He got wood, he got some old rope, and he designed a postcard rack for counters and displayed them in a very attractive way. I wish I had one of those racks. I've only seen one once. I've never seen one for sale, but it's kind of a lifetime mission to find a Bob Peterson original rack. I would just love it. But anyway, his 5-cent postcards sold so well, they pushed him to buy a van. He bought this van, and then he was seen all over Arizona taking pictures of our beautiful state. I would be willing to bet that if you picked up 10 postcards from the 50s and 1960s and you turned them over, it would say Peterson, Bob Peterson, or Peterson Studios. Let me tell you about Peterson Studios. He developed a processing plant down on Van Buren Avenue, and during the height of popularity in the 50s of postcards, Bob Peterson was publishing 25 million postcards a year. Let me repeat that, 25 million postcards a year, and he was selling them. So anyway, if you appreciate fine views of our fair town of Sedona, you will see in most Sedona postcards, if you turn them over, that they were either Bob Peterson of Phoenix or they were Bob Bradshaw of Sedona, but he just made more postcards. I had a connection to him, although I never got to meet him. In the 90s, when we were still living in Glendale, Bob Peterson's daughter, Vicki, was a member of our postcard club. She took good care of her dad, but he needed to be in a nursing home because by then he had dementia. And she would remind us at every postcard monthly meeting, please send a postcard to my dad. He may not be able to read the back, he may not ever realize where they're coming from. But when Bob gets a postcard, he always has a smile on his face. So we all did that. And, it was kind of neat to have her as a connection. So anyway, let's talk a little bit about the postcards today, where they are and what they're worth. While I mentioned that most all of them were sold for a nickel each, today you would expect to pay $3 to $5 or even a little higher for one of the Arizona comic postcards. They are in demand. Where do I find them? Well, once a year, Arizona has a fine postcard show. It's down in Phoenix at the North Central Baptist Church, right off of Central. And postcard dealers come from all over the West, and that's one source. It's the third weekend of January every year, and you can always get a hold of me and I'll remind you, or just look online for Phoenix Postcard Show. Many times I find the comic cards in antique stores, and I would hope that they would be well cared for. What do you look for when you buy a postcard, any postcard? Well, you look for sharp corners. It does not matter, and you look for, obviously, a postcard that is not highly creased or missing a corner or badly used or a lot of edge wear. A postcard does not lose value if it's been written on. In fact, I know, and I still know, a guy in Phoenix who told me early on in the Postcard Club, "Do you know why I collect postcards?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Because I love reading other people's mail." So if there's a stamp on the back, it may even add to the value. And of course, if there's a message about Arizona, it has historical value as well as the value of the image on the front. Many times postcards are called history on a little piece of cardboard, and that is true. Now, when you're getting postcards, they need to be cared for. They should be in a plastic sleeve. You can buy those online. There are many postcard dealers online, by the way. I forgot to mention that. And you can, if you look on bigger sites as Hip Postcard or eBay, you can kind of determine a common value. I would suggest that if you're interested in collecting, that you check those sites on a topic you're interested in. The most expensive postcard I've ever seen at that postcard, by the way, was $1,400. And it was a guy running for president that I had never heard of before and have never heard of since. I can't tell you his name. But most postcards, again, are in that $3 to $5 range if they're comics. And I would suggest that you get archival sleeves or archival paper to store them in if you're serious. Well, a lot of people just enjoy sending them to friends, and I know I'm a person that sends out postcards all the time. No, I haven't been traveling last year or this year, but it's funny. I always love to pick up Route 66 postcards. These are reproductions, and if I have to respond to something, or I have a thank you, or I have an invitation, that's a great way to use postcards. People are shocked when they actually see something they like in the mailbox. So anyway, I will conclude by saying these postcards that you'll be looking at are funny. Again, don't be shocked if they're a bit politically incorrect, but you've got to remember it was a different time, and that's just history. So thank you for your time and letting me show these postcards with you. And you can contact me. I'm in the phone book, and I'm online at jinxclark.com. So thank you for your attention.